we really have to start over in some cases with our businesses and really reestablish our clientele are in different places than they were 3-4 months ago. Some of them have had kids. Some of them have become homeschoolers and they need the virtual option because they can't make it to the gym. They have even more barriers to getting to the gym and taking the time to take classes or work with a trainer. So now we have different pain points that we're trying to serve. And we really have to get back to the ground level on what our business's strategy is, what our unique offer is, and our value propositions, because that's what you have to completely reestablish in this new world that we're living in.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Masters in Fitness Business Podcast, where you get to stand on the shoulders of giants. And today I'm bringing you a giant from the state of Connecticut, Shannon Weinstein, and she is a certified public accountant based in Connecticut. Her company, Financial Solutions, serves fitness professionals and business owners around the country. If I can talk, this is pretty late for me to do a podcast, so this is a social experiment. And then also, I need to let you know that although Shannon is a certified public accountant, any information she shares in today's episode is intended to be educational in nature and does not represent individual tax or accounting advice. Please consult your accounting or tax professional if you wish to implement any of the strategies discussed in today's episode. So Shannon, now that we got the legal stuff out of the way, let's get into the nitty gritty. You reached out on the podcast and through email, and we set up the podcast, and you caught my attention with the story of your one client who had 5 years worth of back taxes. And I think the story is important because it sets it up, because a lot of people are scared to ask for help with their finances and their numbers because they're scared to be embarrassed. So you want to share that story about your client who had 5 years of taxes he hadn't filed and how you dug him out of that hole, and how that's a pretty common occurrence in the fitness industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me on. Yeah, and actually it's multiple clients who are in this position. So it's actually pretty common that I see folks come to me with several years that they haven't filed or trying to catch up, and nothing like, the year 2020 so far to remind us that this is really important. And a lot of folks are motivated to get caught up and realize that they were further behind, or so they thought. And a lot of folks just end up in this trap of, missing 1 year and then thinking, okay, well, the next year comes and then the next year comes and they still haven't gotten around to filing. And it's kind of like that mentality of when you're on a diet and you have one cookie, you might as well eat the whole box. You miss 1 year, you might as well not file for a while.
I call that,
I've already screwed it up.
Yeah, I call it hitting the fuck it button. Fuck it.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So and it's totally human. A lot of people run into that, especially folks in the fitness industry who I work with, who just, are kind of have this fear around money or around taxes and the stuff that we don't understand. It's really not that easy to understand, or maybe we didn't learn about much in school or when we were younger. It's just so easy to get overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that stuff doesn't go away by magic. Some uncle doesn't, pass away and leave you an inheritance so you can pay all your back taxes. So what does a plan to get somebody out of that situation look like? Where do you start?
Well,
what are the basics?
Yeah, I always start with just like, where are we at right now with everything? Like, how are the books and records? Where do we leave off, right? And picking it up from there. There's no shortcut. There's no cheating it. There's no skipping a few years. Like, you have to go back and file everything. And it is a project, but once it's done, and you're up to date and you're moving forward. And the best thing you can do is start as soon as possible, because the problem definitely does not go away with time. And quite the contrary, it only gets worse over time with interest and penalties that add up, and they can stack up the longer you wait. So the best thing to do is just to get it done as soon as possible and have a plan. Work with your accounting professional, figure out a plan on how you can pay back what you owe. Because what a lot of people don't realize is when you file your taxes and you owe money on taxes, you can pay as much as you can towards that just to reduce the amount of interest that will accrue. So you want to make sure you can cover as much as you can of that tax payment, and not just let it sit there thinking, oh, I have a $10,000 tax bill, I can't afford that, and paying nothing. Pay what you can so that that balance goes down.
Gotcha. Those are all important tools. And then I want to get to the reason I had you on the show, because we were talking about the Warren Buffett quote
Yeah.
that you don't know who's swimming with a suit until the tide runs out.
Yeah.
And
You don't know who's
in
swimming
20
naked until the tide runs out.
exactly till the tide runs out. And in 2020, the tide ran out on the fitness industry. And some people were left out there butt naked. So you want to share some of your experiences with your clients and some advice that you might give somebody who was caught swimming without a suit?
Yeah, and it's not just financial, it's in business overall. Like, we realized how unprepared we were for something like this and how rapidly we had to adapt. And I think that that quote is so fitting because it really did run out on all of us, and all of us were in this together. All of us were swimming in the ocean, and some of us had suits on, some didn't, and nobody knew who was who. And I think the fitness industry was a great example of that, because you realized what gyms and studios were building the infrastructure around a virtual offer and had a plan in place or a contingency and had the capital built up and the money built up in reserves and the emergency funds to be able to sustain a bit longer. Those who went after those PPP loans on day one and brought people back on board, the really proactive folks. And then there were a lot of, I'd say 90%, who maybe were not as prepared and were really kind of caught off guard, had to basically try to tread water, right? When the, if you want to use that analogy, the just trying to stay afloat through the end of this, and realizing that something I just discussed this past week with one of my clients was how we really have to start over in some cases with our businesses and really reestablish our clientele are in different places than they were 3-4 months ago. Some of them have had kids. Some of them have become homeschoolers, and they need the virtual option because they can't make it to the gym. They have even more barriers to getting to the gym and taking the time to take classes or work with a trainer. So now we have different pain points that we're trying to serve, and we really have to get back to the ground level on what our business's strategy is, what our unique offer is, and our value propositions, because that's what you have to completely reestablish in this new world that we're living in.
Yeah, that is so true. I was talking to a group of owners today. There were 4 of us, and our clients are down 40 to 60%. You know, it's all across the board, but somewhere in that range, 40 to 60% reduction in clients, which translates to revenue. And what I didn't realize, we've been open, this is our 2nd week opening, is how truly terrified some people are.
Yeah.
And they don't want to come in. They don't have a date that they think they can come back in. And we were talking to this group of owners, and we think there's a 10 to 15% of our clients who will never come back. Either they've fallen off the wagon, they've lost their job, or they're just too petrified to come in. So you have to reconstruct your business and your business model and your marketing and everything. So do you have any advice for people in that situation, which is pretty much everyone?
Yeah. One strategy that I've heard, I actually heard it on another interview, was a gym owner who was highlighting on their social media advertisements about their gym reopening. Having a plan is key. Let me back up to that. Having a rollout plan, like just reopening without any thinking that you can just hit resume from what you've been doing, is not going to work. You need to take a step back, reevaluate, right? You've got a whole new environment now. You've also got new costs from a financial standpoint. You've got to pay for cleaning. You've got to pay for all the other things that will make you compliant. So you've got additional costs and lower revenue. You have to be super tight about those expenses that were the nice to haves before that are now just, probably a little bit
Mandatory.
extra. Yeah,
Mhm.
go down to the essentials. Really go after what value your clients are looking for. But when you're marketing, it's about community. 100% it's about community, because that's what people miss the most. And also, one of the trainers I was talking to said, advertise every piece of equipment, show people on every piece of equipment they cannot get at home. Like,
That's a good
don't
point.
show them playing around with the weights and the kettlebells. Bring them over to, the battle ropes and the turf and the other stuff that isn't in their basement or their, bedroom, that they will attach to and say, oh man, I missed that. I need to go do that. And create that little bit of FOMO, so to speak, and make them want to come back. Now, of course, the safety guidelines are everything. Like, you need to make
Mhm.
sure their protocols are in place and that you can give confidence to them that they will be safe in your hands, because there are a lot of states right now, and I think Connecticut is one of them, where if someone gets ill in your facility, it becomes like, let's say one of your trainers gets ill, it's assumed to be a workplace issue, like a workplace infection. And the employer can be at risk for the protocols in place. Even if that person got it from somewhere else, it's very
Mhm.
hard to trace, obviously. So you have to be really careful about the environment that you're setting up and making sure everyone feels safe, and that you're taking care of everything according to the protocol. But that being something you should be highlighting, right, about safety. People have new values now: safety,
Mhm.
community, and just feeling like they're taken care of.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough, how important it is to have a plan and have safety protocols in place, and don't mail them in. Make sure that you and your team are following them, because this is something that came up today and in the owner's discussion. Is it's it's a high probability that you will have a COVID positive person in your facility at some point. And so, if you haven't followed the safety protocols that you set up and you said you were going to do for your clients, and then you have a COVID positive person in your facility, you can be on the hook for that. Now, you also have to have a plan in place if and when, I would say when, you have a COVID positive person in there. You better have an action plan. It better be clear and concise, and everybody should know about it and follow it to the letter. That's so,
Yep.
so important. I mean, because otherwise you could be out of business.
Exactly. And after all of this effort, right, after maybe you applied for the PPP and you got the loan, and now you're back in business, you got that injection of cash that you needed, and now it's up to you to reinstate the operations. And if you drop the ball there, just one report can have it all, go away. You have to keep fighting, and you have to stay with it and stay consistent, and, and stick with the plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important now that we're starting a reopening process, which I'm grateful for. But I found myself that I wasn't giving it the respect that it was due as a business owner. Regardless of how I feel about it, personally, I have to address this as a business owner. I have to do what is best for the business. And so I have to approach it from that point and have my team approach it from that point. So
Yeah.
we talked about all of that. Let's talk about PPP loan forgiveness, because in our discussions, I learned there's really two categories of PPP loan forgiveness, and nobody really knows what that looks like, but you can still prepare for it. So you want to share that with the listeners?
Yeah. And I'm assuming the two categories, you're talking about the two sets of terms.
Yes.
Yeah. So here's what happened with the PPP. Back in April, they initiated the PPP loans, and by now most gym and studio owners know about this and probably were able to take advantage of it, I hope. But basically, the Small Business Association backed a bunch of loans that were written by these small local banks mostly, and some bigger banks got involved too. And what they did was they issued a bunch of loans out based on your payroll numbers or based on your profit, depending on if you're a corporation, sole proprietor, and so on. So we had these loans come out and they used up the funding pretty quickly. Then another wave of funding came through, and the terms were that you had to spend this money by June 30th, and there were certain terms associated with it will be forgiven pretty much if you follow these sets of rules. And some of that was using 75% of it for payroll costs, and using it by June 30th, which was I think an 8-week time frame from when most people got the loan. So what they did was June 5th, they enacted a new law where as of June 5th going forward, if you get a PPP loan, now it's a 24-week, no, sorry, is it 24-week? Yeah, I think it's 24-week, but or to the end of the year. So if most people, it will be to the end of the year term, and then to spend the money. 60% has to be used for payroll or whatever they consider payroll for your business. There's different ways to calculate quote unquote payroll. And then there's different terms on how the loan is paid back for whatever isn't forgiven. So now we have an extended way of spending that money or getting that loan. So what they basically did was in June 5th, they said, we're going to open this up where if you're getting more of this funding, it would not be fair to people to make them pay it in 3 weeks. So they wanted to make sure that they gave ample time for people to utilize that loan. So what they did was they extended all of that for June 5th forward. So if you haven't taken advantage of the PPP yet, I think you still can as of now, but it would be under those new terms which are out there.
So just to be clear, if you originated a PPP before June 5th, you still have 8 weeks, the 8-week timetable. If your PPP loan is June 5th or beyond, then you have probably to the end of the year. But who makes that ultimate call?
That's my understanding right now, because if you had signed, and ultimately it goes back to your loan document, right? Like go back to your bank that you signed the loan agreement with, because those terms are those terms. So if they haven't issued you a modification to that loan, then those terms are what are true. So it's worth asking your bank to say, hey, I saw this stuff that came out. Is my loan affected by that? You can always verify with them and they'll say, no, you're subject to the original terms. But you should be prepared that you basically took on the loan, if you took it on in April, under the assumption that it had to be spent by June 30th and all of the terms that came along with that. So you should be operating as though that's the case for sure. And just clarify with your bank if you have questions, because they're the ones who are the authority on the terms that were written for you.
So, and that's also my understanding that if you have any questions about the term forgiveness, go to the bank where you originated the loan, because they are the ones that set the terms, regardless of what the Fed say or the SBA says. Correct?
Yeah, they should align, but it's always best to verify in documentation that whatever you signed with your bank matches what you're seeing in the news, right? And matches what your assumptions are, because ultimately you're going to be held to what you signed in that document. So just make sure you're doing your due diligence and reading that to understand the terms that you're signing in for. And for the most part, you can expect that they'll be the same, but there are specifics around maybe what is going into your cost of payroll to generate the amount of the loan that might vary bank to bank. So you want to make sure that you're following whatever your bank protocol is.
Gotcha. All right. So that clears that up. So now comes my favorite line item on our discussion list, is getting your shit together moving forward and what that looks like. Right. So I'll give you the mic, Shannon.
So we kind of went into this a little bit already with the, understanding what your new operating structure looks like, right? So you've got new costs, right? New, hopefully new sources of revenue, right? You shouldn't be relying solely on your classes and training sessions anymore, because as you said, you're going to have drop off. So you got to be thinking, how am I going to recoup that revenue? What else can I offer, right? So is it virtual? which is a little bit safer for a lot of people? Is it adding more value by putting them in some type of membership program where they're getting virtual classes or on-demand classes, and then they're getting recipes, nutrition coaching, and other things like that? So maybe you have a different offer now, different revenue streams. You're going to have increased costs because you're going to have increased safety protocols. You're going to have to pay for cleaning supplies, the staff to show up. And my gym reopened, and we were being asked to come in 15 minutes before class, 15 minutes after class, be able to take our own temperature, I think help with some of the members. You have to bring in your own equipment. There's just more maintenance of everything. Like everything is going to take longer. You're going to be able to offer less classes because you're going to have time in between to clean. You're also going to have less capacity, so you can't have a certain number of people in class. So there are so many different things that are going to change around the environment that you have a different operation now. And you need to come back to the drawing table and say, okay, this is how much I can really expect to make per month in income. Here's my rent, here's my cleaning costs, here are my equipment purchases I need to make maybe, and other things that you need to do, and your instructor payroll, right? So am I in a position where I'm going to be cash positive? And if not, if it really is ending up like my costs are way higher, now we have to talk about how can we either supplement those revenue streams, how can we cut the non-essential costs, what can we do to fix this? It really turns into a similar thing to like a diet and exercise, right? It's like, how can I consume less calories or make sure I'm burning them appropriately? It's just the same balance of how do I balance this out to get the goals that I want of having more income than I have expenses, and being able to buffer that. Because one thing we all learned through this whole thing was that we weren't ready in terms of savings either. So if you were just quote unquote living paycheck to paycheck, or if you were just kind of going week to week and hoping for those auto pay memberships to cover you, if you were just kind of staying afloat and that wasn't generating any savings, then you're probably in that position where now it's really important that your income exceeds your expenses, because you need to start building that up too. That's something we should be establishing, even though I know it's really hard. You can save in any economy, you can save in any environment. It's just about budgeting that amount to say that is untouchable and that is going into the reserve, just a small amount every so often, something, just to start adding it up over time. Because that's really what you're going to need when the tide runs out again.
Yeah, those are valid points, because going back to the PPP loan forgiveness, one thing that we didn't touch on was that a lot of owners will get that PPP loan and they'll throw it into their account, and then they'll start doing Parkinson's law accounting, right?
Yeah.
And I'll let you explain what that is, but that's not tracking their expenses. They're not setting themselves up to get that money forgiven, but also they're not setting themselves up to see what their costs are and what their income is, to see if they're cash positive. They just see there's a big amount in the bank account and they're good. So you want to break that down?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing with the PPP. The PPP was a boost, right? It was not the long-term solution. It was just a cash boost so that you could keep going, right? The PPP does not generate new members for you. The PPP does not create sales. The PPP just helped you maintain a certain amount of cash flow until you could get that moving again. And it does not create sales. So just by thinking you got the PPP, I'm good, that's not going to hold you afloat. That's not swimming. That's just a raft to have you sit there, right? So to move forward, you're going to have to really revisit everything there. And you brought up a great point, which is a little bit of the financial fitness aspect of this, which is the mindset of, you brought this up with the bank account. I want to hit on that. Looking at your bank account and judging that you're financially sound, that you're cash positive, that you can afford whatever. If you're just looking at that bank account balance, that is the equivalent of saying, I am healthy because I weigh X today. And as fitness professionals, we know how ridiculous that sounds. If I said I weigh 120 pounds, therefore I'm healthy, that should make everyone cringe, right?
Hmm.
That's not what healthy is. That's also not what your financial health is, your cash balance, because that is just the outward perception of what you have. But in reality, behind that cash balance, you could be in crippling debt. You could have expenses you haven't paid, credit card balances. You could owe people money. You could just know that there's a huge expense coming down the pike. You could have a broken roof in your facility. That doesn't put you in a real cash positive position. You need that money to be able to sustain, but also, to cover those types of expenses. So just by looking at your cash balance, that only tells you one little metric about your overall financial health of your business. And too often we rely on that as the snapshot that we look at, and we react to that and we act on that, which is what's really scary, is that we behave like we have this money and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Like it's always going to be there. Like we wrote a check and it's not going to come out of the account.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly, exactly.
and the other thing that I think it's necessary to point out is that I know as soon as we closed, I contacted my landlord and basically all my overhead expenses and got them reduced as much as I could going into this. And I'm glad I did because, that 2 weeks turned into 3 months. But
Right.
that's not going to last forever. Pretty
No,
soon, those bills are going to come back on. I'm going to have to pay full rent. I'm going to have to, catch up on my utilities, credit cards, creditor, you name it. And so my expenses are actually going to go back up unless I change that. So it's even more important that I realize that I know that the services I'm providing, I'm doing so at a profit and not at a loss. So,
exactly, exactly. And you
so
mentioned Parkinson's law, which is
okay,
another thing too. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, Parkinson's law basically says broadly, and I'm paraphrasing, something will fill the space you give it, right? So how many times have you been given a week to do something and you always get it done on the sixth day because you have the week and it always gets deprioritized until it has to get done? And the same thing goes with your money. If it's there, you'll spend it. If it's there, you'll spend it. So if you have time, you will spend time getting something done. If you have money, you will spend money, and know that, okay, as long as I'm okay, my cash balance is okay, I'm fine. But that's the scary thing, is you have to almost trick your mind. And this is one of my tips to save, is you have to automate the saving piece first before anything else happens. You got to make sure that that money gets taken out of that account and out of sight, out of mind, into another bank account somewhere where you're not going to be tricked into thinking you have that money. Same thing with your tax money. If you're putting money aside for taxes, it needs to go somewhere else where you can't see it, so that you don't even remember that it was in there. You're never convinced that that money's in your bank account. It was always over there, ready to go, and you're not tempted by it.
that's a good point. I mean, and that's just a way of practicing self-discipline.
Right.
Even if it means just removing the temptations, like we tell our clients, if you don't bring crap into the house, you don't eat crap.
Exactly. If you have the whole box of Oreos right there on the counter, what do you think's going to happen?
Exactly. If you bring the cookies in the house, your willpower is going to fail you and you're going to eat them. So if the
Yeah,
money's there and you feel tempted, you're going to spend it. So
exactly.
it's best to set up a system and have somebody help you, accounting professional, because most trainers don't know accounting and don't want to know accounting. But have somebody help you set it up to protect you from yourself and protect your
Yep.
business from yourself. So, because there's nothing worse than slaving 90 hours a week and then having nothing to show for it. I'll never forget. It was my second year in business, because the first year I didn't owe any taxes because of all the initial expenses. We operated at a loss in the first year. Second year, I get this tax due, and my accountant said, "Man, you had a really good year." And I look at him like, "I did." He's like, yeah, you made this much money. I'm like, where the fuck did that money go? You know, and
Yeah.
you're like, what have I been doing? You know, so it's so frustrating
I have
to
those
do that.
conversations all the time. All the time. It's like, you had a great year. Sorry, you're gonna owe money.
Right.
And then you're like, I don't even have any of the cash left. Where did it go? I can't even pay
Yeah.
the taxes on it now. And that happens so often. And that's why having tax planning is so key, because it's about having a plan going into, you should have no surprises come April. Anyone listening to this, you have no reason to have a surprise come April if you are meeting with your accountant during the year and being proactive about asking what position you're probably going to be in, because we can tell you in the fall winter timeframe, we can tell you, hey, this is what you're probably going to be looking at. Here's what you should do by the year end to make sure that doesn't happen. And people don't take advantage of that as much as they should.
Yeah. And that's a good point. That's a good segue to talk about prepping for 2020 taxes,
Yep.
because hands down, 2020 has been a year. I mean, it's like the GOAT of bad years right now. I don't know if it qualifies as the GOAT, but it's
Yeah.
up there. You know, now we got some kind of dust plume coming. Who and what's next? You know, locust. But
Oh my gosh.
so what advice can you give people to help them prepare for their 2020 taxes in the fitness industry?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things that I think are going to be pivotal. So if you're not already doing this, this is something to start doing. And that is keeping track of everything really closely and cleanly in terms of your financials for your business, or if you're a fitness professional, just making sure you have all your income and expenses tracked and documented. That's going to be crucial to make sure you can take advantage of all the deductions you can, so that you will owe less come tax time. Because a lot of us, at least for those who are maybe fitness professionals who worked for gyms and went off on their own and did virtual sessions, or, you know, a lot of us just decided to go off and do our own thing for a while. And what you have to realize is that's business income, and that there are certain things you have to do around that. And if you're a gym or studio owner, you're going to have to be keeping track very closely of how you spent all of the money you got from the PPP, if you got one. Every dollar should be tracked, because you're going to have to apply for forgiveness. And if you know, and then any income expenses, just track them really, really cleanly using either a software platform or a spreadsheet, whatever it is that you can use. My motto with my clients is, the best way to keep your books is the one you're actually going to do. Because so often I see people say, yeah, I bought QuickBooks, but I never opened it. And I'm like, well, then it's useless, because any number not written down is not very helpful. So I don't care if it's crayon on a napkin. I don't care if it's a written journal. It's better than nothing in QuickBooks. So I tell everyone, whatever method you will use consistently that is part of your habits already, or you have a habit trigger, like maybe you journal in the morning, put your, you know, your accounting next to that and say, I'm going to just jot down all my expenses at the same time. Something that you will be able to do legitimately that and consistently. So keeping track of everything really closely is key. And then obviously meeting with a professional, meet with your accountant during the year. They should want to help you with that. They should not be, I mean, given as an accountant myself and a fitness professional, it's been a crazy few months. And the tax deadline was extended to July 15th, which hasn't come yet as of the time that we're recording this. And it feels like April part 2. And it's, you know, a 6-month tax season for me, but it got to space out some of the work. Hopefully accountants are not that super busy in the summer. I don't know what's going to happen with the deadline again. I don't know if they're going to extend it again as of now, but you want to just get your 19 stuff filed, get yourself in a position where you can cover 2020 and get caught up, because that's going to be huge to not fall behind, because we have a lot going on in July. We've got the 2019 taxes due, but also the first 2 estimates of 2020 if you're paying estimates. So that can be a pretty big bill if you haven't been planning ahead for that and saving up to pay it. And Yeah, you just want to make sure you're planning ahead. Please meet with your accountant. And if you don't have one, find somebody that you can meet with and have a plan in place for that so that there are no surprises in 2021.
It will definitely help you sleep better. There's nothing that will
Yeah.
rob your sleep like knowing you have a huge tax bill and you don't have any money to pay it. Um,
Yeah.
and the other thing that I think we need to talk about is number one, because I guarantee you, because most gyms were closed for at least 3 months. Some are still closed, like upstate New York, they're still closed. But I guarantee you there are trainers that were in that gym that, and being a trainer for 30 years, I know I would, who have gone rogue, gone off the reservation, or training their clients on their own and accepting payment for it all. And maybe even realize, hey, this is a pretty good gig. Maybe I shouldn't even go back. Maybe I can sustain myself like this. This can be my own business. They still need to pay attention to what you're saying. The first stop they should
Oh,
make, their
even
first
more.
stop should be an accountant to prepare themselves, because in addition to, claiming the income that they're making, even though it's under the table, some of it's under the table, you still have to file taxes. You still have to say you made something. I know, Shannon, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But the other thing that you brought up was that unemployment is taxable.
Yeah. If you've
So,
been making unemployment, it's federally taxable. So that means it's taxable on a federal level. If you don't have taxes withheld out of it, which I've heard some states actually offer, we all know that it was a total mess trying to get unemployment, to get it on time, to get the right amount. It was, every state had their issues. I work with clients all around the country and I heard nothing but nightmares about unemployment. So if you are getting unemployment, verify if taxes are being taken out of that automatically. If they are not, you're going to have to be very careful, because I think that if they are not, I'm going to venture the guess. Again, I don't know your situation, but I'm going to venture the guess that they will be subject to federal income tax come 2021. So you're going to have to be prepared to pay taxes on that as income. States will vary, but federally it is taxable.
okay. And then what advice would you give to that trainer who's, been training clients, making income, thinking about
Mm.
going out on their own?
Yeah, and oh, there's so much. My entire, basically my entire Instagram account is dedicated to that person. But
Okay.
but basically my advice is find a professional, obviously, to you can consult with and get advice from, personalized. But when you go off on your own, you're making business income, whether you are a business entity or not, whether you have declared that you're an LLC or whatever, you're filed anything. Once you wake up and decide you're in business and you're going to collect income directly from your customer, you are in business, you are a sole proprietor at the very least, and you need to pay taxes on that as business income. The nice thing is that you can deduct business expenses against that income, so you're only taxed on the profit. So that's why the income and expense tracking is so important, because you can actually reduce your tax liability really, really low if you're tracking the right deductions.
Okay. And then you need a professional to tell you what those are and what the allowable amounts are.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, I can give you a few of the big ticket ones that I see most common with my fitness instructor and trainer clients. But any of your continuing education, CPR, certifications and licenses. If you're teaching virtually, now you're talking about your electronic equipment, maybe your laptop, if you got something special for that, sound equipment, maybe a microphone, maybe music, maybe equipment. Things like that. These things can add up, especially if
Mhm.
you invested in a nice setup for your home to do this virtually back in March or April. That can be a tax deduction for you. And when I say a tax deduction, I definitely don't mean it's free. You're going to get a rebate for it, or you're not going to have to pay for it. It just means that it helps reduce your taxable income so that you have to pay less in taxes when everything comes due. So having records of those expenses is going to be really, really helpful, and to work with an accountant who understands your industry so that they can advise you on what's deductible.
Yeah. Good advice. Good advice. Well, Shannon, thank you for coming on the show again. And now we get to my favorite part, which
Hmm.
won't be as big of a surprise, but I still think the answers will be gold.
Yeah.
So the three questions I ask every guest are, first one is, what has been your most successful failure? And by that, I mean, at the time, it seemed like a devastating loss you weren't going to be able to recover from, but you took life lessons from that propelled you to greater success down the road.
Yeah, and I'd say not really a failure, and I'm not even sure. You asked me these already, and what's funny is I think I'm going to answer them differently anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you say it that way, not necessarily a failure, but definitely a moment where there was a shift was I left working for a big firm that I thought I was going to make partner at, thinking I was giving up, right? I wanted to be like, one of the few female partners in the big firm and feel like I made it. And what I realized was I really wanted to just help individual people. Like I wanted to help my colleagues that were in my fitness classes. I wanted to help serve my community way more than I wanted to help some of these big companies and their bottom lines. So I think that was a big shift for me in terms of my biggest quote unquote failure or point where I felt like I was giving up. But in reality, I was just investing in a happier future for myself.
Yeah, I think that's the definition of success right there, is choosing a path that that fulfills you a little bit more, and you're a little bit more passionate about, and not based on just the money, because sometimes
Yeah.
the money you can feel like you're selling your soul or selling out, for sure.
I was
It's
selling, I think I sold my 20s away to working. And that, doesn't matter how much money you make if you can't enjoy spending it.
Right. If you don't have if you can't hang out with your friends or see friends or create those kind of relationships in your life, like deeper relationships outside of the workplace, because I'm a firm believer that it's not a work-life balance. It's all your life. All of it's your life, even the parts where you're at work. So you better make
Exactly.
it good.
You choose how you spend your time, no matter how you're spending it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And my next question is, since you've been working in the fitness industry, what is the biggest surprise that you've had to deal with that you did not see coming?
I would say, and it shouldn't have come as a surprise, but this is basically why I do what I do. Like I said, growing up as an accountant, I was literally helping my dad out because he was a CPA, and I studied accounting in high school through college. And I worked for 8 years at a firm that was all other accountants. And I realized I was immersed in this subculture of other CPAs, and being the dumbest one at the conference table, I still knew more than like the average person about this topic, right? Because I forget that I studied this and this is something I dedicated a lot of my time to. And coming out of that and actually falling in love with fitness and going to my Zumba classes in Boston, where I started my career, and really finding that sense of community, meeting other people from all different backgrounds. I mean, we had other instructors in our studio that were TV producers, engineers, everything, you know, and getting to know them and realizing that the stuff I knew was not common sense. The stuff around taxes was not taught in most schools, and realizing I was incredibly blessed and lucky to have opportunities to learn these things and to find them to be easy to understand such that I could actually teach them. And a lot of my content on Instagram and on videos is me explaining a lot of these concepts in a very simple way that caters to the fitness industry, because it is simple. It's just no one explains it that way simply. So a lot of accountants are going to be using jargon that nobody understands, and then you tune out and you just disassociate and think, whatever, I'll pay you, make the problem go away. But what I realized as the surprise to get to the answer is just that I really had something there that wasn't expected. I didn't expect it to be not common sense to some people, and realized that I could actually serve this, and I had a role in this community to help with that.
Yeah, and I like that story because it's a great analogy to the fitness industry, because you can spend, 4 years studying exercise science, maybe play some sports, and then you just have these and you're always around people who are exercising and no exercises, and you're in the lab or you're doing whatever, writing papers on exercise science. And so you get so familiar with these basic principles and the nuances is that you think that, oh, this is common sense. And then you go to train clients, you're like, oh yeah, just, a triple extension on that jump. And they're like, what do you mean triple extension? I thought you said
Yeah.
you wanted me to jump, and then a lot of them fall in love with the jargon because look how smart I am because of the vocabulary that I'm using
Right.
with you. But like you said, they glaze over, clients glaze over when you do that.
It makes you
And
unapproachable. It makes you
yes,
unapproachable because you can't relate. Because I had this happen where a trainer would say something like, gosh, it was like something about a squat position. And I'm like, I don't know what you mean. Like when you say chest up, I'm like, I can't put my chest up and do the thing and do this. Like, what do you mean by that? And then someone would finally say it in like a kinesthetic cue.
huh?
Like, like when you're doing a row, they'd say, okay, pretend there's an egg between your shoulder blades, crack it. And I'm like, oh, okay. But if you try to explain the biomechanics, I'm like,
Exactly.
people will learn differently based on what you tell them, will relate to their daily lives. And that's what I try to do with money.
Yeah, and that's important because I think that's an important component of educating. If your students aren't learning, then you're not teaching, So you have to deliver the information in a way that not only they can understand and relate to, but sticks. I read a book called can't remember, but he talked about using word darts, that just stick. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it's the same thing when you're educating. So whether it's teaching fitness professionals how to do accounting or teaching your clients how to do a squat, it's about education. And if
Yeah.
they don't understand what you're telling them, then you're not educating them.
Yeah. And I always tell my clients too, but my clients are a lot of trainers, gym and studio owners. And whenever they kind of go, oh, I don't understand this stuff. This doesn't make sense. Or they start getting discouraged. I say, I want you to just hold on to that feeling for a second. That's how your client feels when you say do burpees. Like hold on to that. That's what they feel like before they meet with you. Cause maybe they're just not feeling exercise right now. They don't love it like you do necessarily. They know they need it, but they may not love it. They may look at exercise like you look at money.
Yeah.
So you have to be sympathetic to that and remember how that feels and just be able to relate to your client on that level and think about what would you like to hear when you're meeting with your accountant and you're like, I gotta go through all this now. It's like, that's how they feel. Remember that. So think
Yeah.
about what you would tell them.
So you make people do their financial burpees. I get
Exactly.
it.
Financial boot camp.
All right. And then my last question is, where do you go for your personal and professional development?
My personal professional development, I am a full believer in always having some type of coach in my camp. So I always have coaching available. I have a business coach that I work with for my business. I go to my clients a lot for feedback though. So I do my best to listen to them and ask them frequently, like, how can I serve you better? What would you like to see more of? And adapting what I offer to them. Because at the end of the day, like you said, if they're not getting it, then I'm not doing my job. So I always have to make sure that they're receiving that they're keeping up with it and trying to figure out how I can better help them succeed. So I'm always looking to them and I'm always looking for new perspectives on what I do because there aren't really that many accountants right now that are 100% online or that are serving fitness professionals or are fitness professionals. You think of an accountant, you probably don't think of someone who looks like me. So I'm trying to get past that stigma and to see how I can stand out in this industry.
Nice. I agree with you 100%. I think it's so important to get feedback from your clients and have that humility to actually take the feedback, especially when it's bad, because I tend to want to take that personal and go, yeah, well, you suck anyway. Yeah, I turn into like a
It's a
6-year-old.
gift though. It's a gift.
Yeah,
Imagine how much
but
time that you
but
would have
it's how
wasted if
you
no one
get
told
better.
you.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
how you get better. Absolutely. Because I tell my team all the time, it's like, you got to keep this place super clean because clients they won't say anything. They'll just leave.
Mm-hmm.
because they, noticed that spot was dirty and was dirty for quite some time. Nobody ever cleaned it, so that feedback is so, so important. I couldn't agree more. Well, Shannon, thanks a lot for spending the time. Can you share where people can get in touch with you, reach out to you if they want to work with you, get more information, find out more, all that good stuff?
Absolutely. So I am taking on new clients, but I'm also offering tons of different workshops and other educational programs. So if gym and studio owners are looking for some of that in their facilities, that's something I do either virtually or hopefully in person at some point. We can return to that, but you can find me. My website is financialsolutions.com, and I'm the most active on Instagram. If you want to DM me there, or just comment, whatever. I'm always on Instagram, and I'm always trying to offer up new videos, new content, and things that will help you. And I love hearing your questions because that helps me create valuable content for everybody.
And what's your Instagram handle?
Sure, it's at Shannon K. Weinstein.
Okay, got it. Okay, and all of those links will be in the show notes. Go to trainergym.net and click on this episode of the show notes, and the links to contact Shannon will be right there. So Shannon, thanks again. I really appreciate it for taking the time. This has been super informative, both of them. So make sure you have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye. And then Shannon, what I'll do, like I said, this is going to come out next Tuesday, so I'll probably do all the editing, producing, and everything for it this weekend, and queue it up for release on Tuesday. So probably on Monday, I'll send you like all the links and copy, artwork, all that stuff. And
cool.
if you can, send me some high resolution pictures or headshots, if you have any, that I can use for the artwork.
I will do that. How many do you need? Because I have a couple. Like I could send
two
one,
or three.
but two or three.
Yeah, like two or three if you have them.
Okay, I'll send you that.
Okay.
Cool. I thought that was definitely, it covered so much more because we already knew like the bullet points.
Right. I agree.
That was good.
It was a lot more succinct, which I liked.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's more like, all right, we know what I'm going to say about this. You could ask like the pointed question, and it was like, okay, there's the answer.
Right. Gotcha. Yep.
Very cool. So all right, I'll send you.
Okay, I'll look for those headshots, and then I'll be in touch probably by Monday.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good rest of your night.
You too.
All right.